Hawaii. We are a part of the Department of Commerce. We are under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. We are part of the National Marine Sanctuary Program. There's actually 13 of them around the country, 2 national monuments. As I was telling everybody outside, we're kind of a unique National Marine Sanctuary because we are designated to protect a single species. All of the other ones are actually ecosystem-based. So that's something that we're looking at changing here in Hawaii possibly. Here's some of the other National Marine Sanctuaries, just so you guys can get an idea of where they're at. Olympic Coast, Port Atlantic, Gulf of Pharaohs. This is the national monument that we have up here in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, Monterey Bay, Channel Islands. These are all the different National Marine Sanctuaries around the country. Okay, so we've been talking about this outside actually quite a bit. So where do you find humpback whales? Well, they're pretty much all over the world, and they have pretty much the same migration pattern. It's just they're in opposite hemispheres. This is the North Pacific stock. This is the South Pacific stock. So you notice they're always moving at the same time in the same direction. So they never meet up. So these guys right now are all heading back down to Antarctica to feed, while ours are all heading down here to breed and to calve. So these are 2 distinct different populations of humpback whales, the North Pacific stock and the South Pacific stock. Okay, so this North Pacific stock is listed as depleted under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. They are protected by the state wildlife laws. The big one, and this is part of the Endangered Species Act, is the 100-yard approach rule. You're supposed to maintain 100 yards from these guys at all times. When you're in a vessel, we always ask that if a whale comes within 100 yards that you actually turn the engine into neutral. Don't turn it off, but just kick it into neutral. There's going to be times that we know that whales will actually come in close to boats. So if they are coming close to you, kick your boat into neutral. Don't turn it off, just leave it in neutral. Once they move on to a safer distance, then you continue on. Kayakers, swimmers, you don't have an engine. You don't have a propeller that's going to hurt the whale. If you're within 100 yards of a humpback whale, you're breaking the law. You need to move yourself immediately from that situation. If you're not, you can be found in violation. We've been having some real big problems with stand-up paddleboarders and kayakers the last couple of years. Not necessarily on this island, but a couple of cases on Maui that actually got prosecuted. The guy ended up paying $600 or $700 because he thought he was doing something that was okay, but he was actually staying right on top of the whale with him the whole time. Again, didn't feel like he was really doing anything to harm the whales. He loved the whales, but he was within that 100-yard approach rule, and we really have tried to be consistent with that. So something that we're watching, we actually do have, not many people know this, but we actually do have enforcement on the island from NOAA 3 times out of once every month, January, February, and March. They're going to be here for a week at a time. We also have our doe care guys on island all the time, but we're adding extra NOAA enforcement during the whale season. So they will be out and about looking for whale violations and other things during January, February, and March. Okay, so here's just some information on our sanctuary. The areas in orange are where the sanctuary is located all around the state of Hawaii. It really only goes out to the 100 fathom, which is about 600 feet. So we're really not talking about that far offshore, especially in some places on this island. You can get to 600 feet real quick, really, really quick. So the sanctuary doesn't really go too far off the coast out here, so it's really pretty close. The sanctuary is a state and federal partnership. It was designated in 1992 and accepted by 1997. We are actually going through our management plan review process right now. Currently what we do a lot of education, research, and resource protection. Since we don't really have any power of authority, we really spend a lot of our time on education, letting people know what's out there and how to properly view and interact with the things that are out there. And we really try to focus a lot of this on the children because children are great enforcement officers. When their parents are doing something wrong, they're wonderful. So we really try to focus on children and working with the younger age group so that we can start to get this information and perpetuate it up that way. We do some research. We've actually sponsored the largest humpback whale research project in the world. It was called Splash. And basically it was a 3-year project where we went out here and up in Alaska, all over the North Pacific, all kinds of different countries were involved using the same protocol to really find out how many whales, get an idea of how many whales were out there, look at the genetics, and just really get a good feel for what's going on. We also focus on resource protection. Believe it or not, we actually have to go out and disentangle whales that come down from Alaska with gear that they've gotten trapped in. So we do some of that. We actually have some vessel collisions every year where whales will get hit by the boats. We try to deal with those situations as well. So we're out on the water quite a bit during whale season. Just a little bit about whales, just for those of you who don't know, they're animals like us. They're pretty much a lot like humans. They share a lot of the same characteristics that we do. Once you get down here, we have cetacea, and then we've got our two suborders. So we have mysticetes, which are our humpback whales, which are the baleen whales, and then the odontocetes, which are our toothed whales. So our mysticetes are from the family Balaenopteridae, and this is the genus and species of the humpback whale. Okay, just gives you kind of an idea of where their lineage is from there. So they are cetaceans, all the cetaceans. We have whales, dolphins, porpoises. They all fall under cetaceans, and we have 83+ species of porpoises. And okay, so here's the baleen that we've been talking about. We actually have some of it outside there. These plates actually hang from the top part of the whale's mouth. This stuff's going to hang down, and they're going to use it for feeding. They get a large mouthful of food and water, use their 1,000-pound tongue to push the water out. All the fish, krill, little critters that they're going to eat are going to stay inside of their mouth. These guys are huge animals, 45 feet long, weigh close to 90,000 pounds. Their throat is only about the size of a grapefruit. They don't eat big food. They eat a lot of little stuff. This is some of the baleen. I'll pass it around. You guys can check it out. Excuse me. This is actually from a juvenile whale that washed ashore here on the west side of the Big Island about 10 years ago. This is from a humpback, and this is real baleen. It's made out of keratin, the same thing that's in your fingernails. And you can see on the inside, it's bristly. So again, this is what's going to keep that stuff from getting out. They're going to swallow that all whole. The water just gets flushed right out. I'll pass this around. You guys can check that out. You can see, so breathing. They are voluntary breathers. They have to think about every breath that they take. Unlike you and I, we can't just go to sleep. They just can't fall asleep and sleep like we do. They have to think about every breath that they take. They basically, their nose remains closed until they force it to blow it open. These are the blows. A lot of times we can tell the difference in the size of a whale just by the blow. If it's a large adult, you're going to have a 15, 20-foot blow out of it. If it's a small juvenile or a calf, you're going to have a 5 or a 10-foot blow. So you can even tell the size of the whale just by the size of their blow. Bigger blow, bigger whale. This is about it. I love this. Over 300, approximately 300 miles per hour, they're breathing out when they breathe out. Think about that though. If you're swimming out in the ocean, it's not always nice and sunny out there. It could be raining, pouring. They actually have to clear a space above their head. So they blow out approximately 300 miles an hour. It clears a space for them to breathe in. They don't want to breathe in water. That's the last thing they want in their lungs. So they're going to clear space above, and they're going to breathe back in that air. It's one of the things that when we're out doing our entanglement response, people always say, oh, it must be so cool to be so close to the whale. It is until they blow snot all over you. That's when things start to change, because it's nasty, and it smells, and it's gross. So here's a little bit of a secret about toothed whales and baleen whales. Baleen whales all have 2 blowholes. Toothed whales only have 1 blowhole. So this is the nares right here. They're closed very, very tightly. And then when it blows out, they're going to open up. It's a little hard to see there, but you can see. They don't blow water out of their blowholes. I've been reading my daughter's children's books, and it's been driving me nuts. They spout water out of their blowholes. No, they don't. Only air that comes out of there. They actually will breathe sometimes before they reach the surface. There will be some water that sits inside their blow. They may just get a little bit of water as they're coming up, but that's air that's coming out. It's not water. They breathe air, just like you and I.
What's the lung capacity of an adult?
You know, I don't know what the square footage or something like that is. I mean, they are 45 feet long. Their lungs are massive. I mean, they can hold their breath for upwards to about an hour. So they've got giant lung capacity.
Are whales able to breathe through their mouths?
Through their mouths. Good question. Well, not humpback whales. I mean, technically, no. It gets a little confusing there, but toothed whales actually have something that's called the Viezbicke, and I'm getting way off topic here, but these guys have the ability to actually to disconnect their Viezbicke. They can actually, basically the mouth is connected straight down to their stomach, but they can disconnect it where their blowhole can go to their stomach. There's actually some some papers out there, there's some thought that maybe even sperm whales may actually be nursing from their mom by going through their blowhole versus their mouth. And if you look at a sperm whale's mouth, think about trying to suckle on a female with teeth and sperm whale's jaw morphology is crazy. Just something that's out there, but basically they have to breathe through their blowholes only. That's really how they breathe. Food goes down there, air goes down the other one. These are some of the toothed whales. You can see they've got some nice big teeth. All species have different numbers of teeth. They can usually use those to grab the food and tear it into small pieces, but they also generally swallow their food whole, so they're not going to sit there and chew it a bunch. They're going to get to where it's comfortable enough for them to swallow it, and then they're going to swallow it whole. There's the single blowhole of the toothed whale. It does divide into two down below, so it's really the same as the other ones. It's just where on the top is one. Okay, so here's some of the characteristics that we share with whales, since we are mammals. One of them is that we breathe air. So mind if I sit here for just a second? Is breathe air, water-blooded, live birth, have hair, and moms produce milk. People always say, have hair, where do whales have hair? Well, I'll go back a little bit. I'll show you this in a second. These bumps all over the front of their face are called tubercles. And out of those, there's a single hair. We think they're for sensory purposes, but we don't know for sure. Again, very difficult to study these guys and to figure out exactly what those tubercles are for. I'll show you better pictures in a minute. Here's some basic information. Lifespan 40 to 80 years. Again, we're still, learning about how long they live. Our research has only been going on for a number of years, so we don't know for sure, but it's at least upwards to 80 years. Length up to about 45 feet. Usually it's about a ton for every foot that you're looking at. If you took a cross-section of them, about every foot of whale is about a ton. Their pectoral fins or flippers are the longest in the whale species. They are 15 feet long. That's kind of where they get their name is wing-like. Fluke is about 15 feet wide. If you guys saw the one that's outside that we had hanging up, it's still on the wall out there. You can check that out when we go out. But it's massive. I mean, it's literally this is basically the size of this room across here. It's about 15 feet. The dorsal fin's only about a foot high. So the dorsal fin's the smallest of the fins that they have. 15% of their total body weight is comprised of skeletal systems. So they're big bone. They got some big bones in there. Ventral pleats, these are awesome. Okay, so when they're feeding, these guys, they come up and you think, well, they've got a pretty big mouth. They can actually disarticulate their jaw, and they've got these pleats that actually will expand. So they take these giant mouthfuls full of water, it fills it all up, and then they push all that water out. But the pleats allow them to get a lot more food in there. And we'll show you some more pictures of this stuff in just a little bit. So ears, they lack any external ear flap. It's located behind and below the eye, just a little bit back, and there's kind of a half of an inch little slit there. Very, very difficult to see. Eyes are located above the mouth line. They're about the size of a grapefruit again. They're brown in color. We don't really know if they can actually see in color. The whole rod and cone thing, we don't really know much about their eyes. So very interesting. And is there really much of a need to see in color in the ocean? When you figure every 10 feet you're going down, you're going to lose another color anyway. How much color do you need to see? So very interesting. Okay, so here's the tubercles. The bumps all over their face. Hard to see here, but there's actually a little hair that sticks out of this bumpy little warp, gross looking thing. Again, we don't know exactly what they're for. Believe it could be sensory. I always liken it to, like, if you're standing out in the wind, you can feel your hair on your arms will actually feel the wind. If you stand in the water, you stand and you swish water at your arm, you can actually feel it in the hairs on your arm. So if you think about where their eyes are at, on the sides of their head too, how do they tell exactly what's in front of them at all the time? Again, don't know for sure, but we think it's some sort of sensory purpose that they're using those tubercles for. It's interesting too because they also have some bumps on their flippers, and they're actually using this stuff. They're finding out that it also actually helps them in their hydrodynamics. There's actually some fan companies in different places you can look up on the internet now. It's called tubercle technology. They're actually putting bumps on the leading edges of fan blades, and it actually provides lower resistance. It's a more efficient fan. So for some reason, these bumps on these animals' bodies are actually providing less resistance as they're swimming. It actually enables them to maneuver their flippers a little easier. But they're actually using this. I mean, if you look at all of U.S. naval submarines, the technology and all that, it's modeled right off of whales and dolphins. Now we're starting to do some of our other things like ceiling fans and maybe even some of these big power generators, putting these tubercles on them because somehow the coefficient, if it does something with the coefficient of drag, and I was reading about the other day, it had something to do with the stall angle. They have a much, it's harder for them to stall out if it was a plane speaking. It changed the stall angle or something weird, but basically it's this technology that we don't really know about what all they do, but they do have some pretty unique functions for these guys. Again, the pectoral flippers we talked about a third of their body length, different colors, can be black, can be white. They get chunks bitten out of them. Sometimes you get a shark bite out of them here and there. They will use them to fend off other animals. They'll use them to make noise out there. You'll see them a lot of times just laying out here 15, 20, 30 times in a row. You know, we don't know exactly what all these things are for. Some sort of communication, but again, we don't know what all the slapping means. Dorsal fin, it's about 1 foot high, very important for us because we can take a picture of it, just like the tail fluke. It's a good form of identification. These body tails, flukes, things like that give us, dorsal fins give us kind of a good reference for IDing them. All right, so this part of the animal is called the caudal peduncle. This is one of the strongest muscles in the animal kingdom. This is basically the motor to this propeller. This area right here is just solid muscle, and that's what's going to get that whale to push that tail up and down. We don't ever get in the water with these guys when we're around them, because if you have a 15-foot tail with that much power, when it pushes down, it can pull you 30, 40 feet underwater, just like that, just with the swirl off of that. So being in the water around these guys can be very dangerous. Even if you don't get hit by them, the pull or the drag that they provide can actually pull you underwater. People want to know, how do you tell a male from a female? I finally found this picture that's kind of very difficult. Females have the hemispherical lobe. It's this small little lobe right here. It's only on females, and it's just past the genital opening, which is right here. Of course, all these barnacles aren't pumping out, and made it kind of messy, but the mammary slits are going to be right in here too, on either side. But this is the lobe. So when you're out there and you see one breach, you can say, oh, it was a female. I saw the hemispherical lobe. Yeah, right. Very, very difficult to see these. Even for us when we're in the water looking for this with a trained eye, half the time I can't see it. So it's tough to find. Very difficult to tell male from female. And there's the mammary slits are hidden in there somewhere. Okay, so here's the flukes now. We talked about the flukes. Can be all white, can be all black, anywhere in between. This is how we ID these guys. No whale has the same, no two whales have the same flukes. They all have different flukes, basically like a fingerprint, which is really cool, helps us out a lot. It does change a little bit in the first year of life, so we kind of really try to stay on top of it, but it usually will stabilize. It's a super benign research technique. We don't have to do anything invasive to the animal. We just show up, take some pictures. Gives us population size, distribution, movement patterns, and life history. We can tell, we get lucky. Sometimes we get sightings that are 30 years apart of a whale tail. And that does happen occasionally. Oh, we saw this earlier 30 years ago, and we've actually got quite a few people here on this side of the island now, too, that are going back and forth between here and Alaska. And they're actually looking for matches from their sightings up in Alaska to down here. So I think it's always very possible. You just have so many darn whales out there, it's just the right place at the right time. This is kind of the general migration patterns that we're seeing from our research. Hawaii does seem to kind of be a hot area to come. Up to about 12,000 whales are coming here every year. But that doesn't mean they're not going to other areas. Sometimes we may have a whale that's here one winter, goes back up here, then decides to come back down over here to California. California girls that year. Comes back up over here. Next year he wants to go to Japan. He comes over here. So we have seen one whale be in all three of those different places. Not in one season, it doesn't go like this. It's up and down, and maybe back over, they can go to these other places. So it's interesting, and we're not seeing, again, we haven't really had any pairings that are lifelong pairings or anything like that. It's pretty much, they find a mate, it's for that temporary time, and then that's the end of it. And all the guys are like, yeah, lucky.
Serial monogamy.
That's right, yeah, that's right. So they migrate 3,000 plus nautical miles from all the way to Hawaii. Migration takes 4 to 6 weeks, usually about a speed of 3 to 8 miles per hour. We've had the fastest time is at 42 days. So that's a quick swim from Alaska down here in about 42 days. Okay, so Usually in Alaska, a calf is weaned and taught to feed. Mom and yearlings sometimes come to Hawaii together, sometimes they don't. Usually if they do, they end up separating pretty quickly. But it's about the longest relationship in their life. It's a 1-year deal, and that's about it. She pretty much is going to be getting rid of that calf at some point. And if you think about it, she's already swam the up and back twice. These females, they're traveling all this way. They don't eat in Hawaii. So they're going to be coming down, having the calf, feeding that calf 80 to 100 gallons of milk a day, swimming that calf back to Alaska, all on one tank of gas. At some point, I have a feeling she probably gets tired of the calf and says, okay, it's time to go do your own thing. I need to do my thing some later. So it's usually about a year. And sometimes you will actually see, calves kind of hanging around the mom. That they come back down with them, and it'll be, oh, mom, I want to hang out. And, they don't get that close anymore, especially if it's a male. They'll kind of hang off on the side. But they typically are about a year with their mom. Here is, hopefully, a little bit of some footage of a mom and calf swimming by. Maybe. Can we maybe drop that down just for a little bit? I'm just going to cut off that video for just a second. Get a little better see. Of course, I played this yesterday and it worked just fine. Let me see. I'll give me 1 second. I'll just have to jump to this for 1 second. Sorry, guys. I just moved the screen. 1 second, let me try one more thing. I may have to go and do it this way. I don't know why it's not working yet. I'll just do it this way. There you go. Good. So you can see there, they will hug tight to mom. Mom has got a great thing called laminar flow. It's like an airplane. It's going to pull that calf along with her. So calf's going to swim right next to mom. And if you think about that 3,000-mile journey, that's going to be a lot of what that calf is going to be doing is getting that free ride. That's a long way to swim, seeing you were just born, maybe 3 or 4 months before. So pretty amazing that they're able to do that.
The calf were born here.
Calves were born here in Hawaii, yeah. Sorry guys, I'll have to jump back and forth on that a couple times here in a minute, but we'll be all right. Let's see if it plays now. Okay, so females are larger than males. Typically, calves consume about 80 gallons of milk a day. Look at this, 40 to 50% milk fat. Wow, that's creamy. If you think about it, though, with these guys nursing, they actually can't get up and perfectly suckle on the mom. The mom actually has to squirt the milk through the water in the baby's mouth. The higher the fat that is, the easier it is to pass through the water without losing any of the nutrients that are in it. So there's a couple of reasons that's that fat. Also, you want to get your baby as big as possible, as quickly as possible, because you have a higher chance of survival. There are sharks and things like that will try to get the calves, depending on the health of the calf. If the calf is healthy and mom is fine, they're not going to get in there. But there are calves that just aren't healthy. We have stillborns, things like that happen, and the sharks will get those pretty easily. But females basically lose 1/3 of their body mass during nursing. It's a lot. It's actually playing perfect. So this is actually some nursing. And it's a little hard to see, but she'll get right down in there. And again, they do the best they can to get up close as possible. The mom will squirt that milk in there. There is some thought that they use the tongue. Bottlenose dolphins actually roll their tongue up like a taco. And then 1 out of 4 people can't do that, by the way. Then they'll actually squirt the milk down in there. There was actually a little bit of milk that was in the water right there. But that's how they will nurse. So they'll sit down there. They actually will get their milk from their mom up to 80 gallons a day, 80 to 100 gallons a day, via that method. So it's pretty amazing. So they do fight, though. They actually fight over the females. Now, it's not to the death, but it's certainly not play out there. They're roughing each other up. they're ramming into each other. We've actually had some entanglement response where there's a competitive group out there, and we're trying to get some gear off of a juvenile whale that's trying to stay next to its mom that's trying to run away from the 5 males that are chasing her. So it's whales everywhere, and you really have to be very careful because there's a lot going on. And when they're like this, they're not paying attention to anything. So it's a little hard to see, but earlier we were talking about groups of whales in Hawaii. Typically, you're not going to see groups of females or aggregates of moms hanging together. It's typically going to be one female and the rest are males. Here's a good example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's like 11 whales in this picture. It's a little hard to see in that one view. It's like 7, 8. There's like 9 of them, and these are all males following one female. So you can see large competitive groups out there actually chasing the females down, trying to get to her. Now, will this one play? Why did one play? Maybe it's or something. Maybe it's just because just see if he does it himself. Okay, come back. Sorry, I'm going to reset here. I apologize. So this is, I'll play it again for you. So this is some of the competitive stuff that you're going to see, and I'll play it again here. You're going to notice they're going to actually run into each other. This guy's blowing bubbles. Blowing bubbles is a sign of aggravation. Kicking each other with the tail, things like that. Sometimes they'll actually open up their mouth and expand their pleats, make themselves bigger, swim with their pectoral flippers out on the side, and it's one of those things where usually what it is you've got your female and you've got your kind of your dominant male will sit right next to her. And if I can avoid fighting all the other males by making myself look big, that's what I'm going to do. And you'll see whales out there, like literally swimming with their flippers out, with their mouth open, with all the other males around, and basically trying to make themselves look bigger so they can avoid conflict. But if another male feels like it's time, he'll come in and actually fight for that female. So they'll lunge on top of each other. This is what you're going to see sometimes. They're going to get pretty beat up. Tubercles will get bumped off, bleeding. Not uncommon to see stuff like that. They do, when you weigh 90,000 pounds and you ram into something, there is an effect at times. They don't kill each other though. There's a lot of peduncle throwing. They'll do all these different displays around each other. Sometimes they'll throw it into each other. Remember, this part's the really strong part, so when that thing gets whipping around, that's when it's dangerous. Peduncle throws, where they'll try to throw it and chop. You can see he's just throwing it around. Inverted tail slaps and tail slaps. This is one where they're just straight up and down. They'll do this one, the guy's actually laying upside down, and I think that's the hemispherical lobe right in there. Female? Yeah. Head lunge, these are pretty cool. I love when these guys do stuff like this. This is amazing to see these guys do this. I mean, for an animal, when they breach and they do these head lunges where they're getting up like this, that takes a lot of effort for something that big to do something like that.
Now, is this an aggressive thing?
Nah, not necessarily. A lot of times the breaches in the head lunges is, again, think of where their eyes are at. If something's on the surface and I can't see what it is, I'm going to lunge up here and take a look. They do this or a spy hop. I think I got one of those cup spy hop. They'll just kind of, they'll just literally just bob up and down, and they'll just kind of, see what's going on, and come back down, and then come back up and look at you, and then go right back down.
That's cool.
And then, of course, there's always the breaches. One thing I like about this picture, though, is remember those things we were talking about when they're feeding? They come all the way down to the navel. So this whole area completely expands out when they're feeding. It's absolutely amazing. All right, so why do they breach? Everybody always wants to know, what do they do? Well, it's part of play, it's part of communication. It could be part of aggression at times. Grooming is a big thing. You've got barnacles that will get all over you. Whale lice are attached to you all the time. They want that stuff off. And if you think about it, it stuns prey. If you've ever heard something hit the water that hard, if there's fish around, you can actually stun fish because of the sound that's produced. A lot of times, when it's not too windy out here, you can hear a whale breach 10, 15, 20 seconds after it's done it because it's so far away. You see it, and then all of a sudden you hear it. You're like, wow, that was a long ways away, but it took the sound a while to get to you. It's pretty cool. Bubble blowing. This is kind of interesting, and we do see this out here. A lot of times in competition, you'll see this. The males will just start blowing bubbles. Makes them look bigger, bigger trail. They also use it for feeding behaviors. When they're feeding, they actually have a bubble net, and they actually will, one animal will be down below blowing bubbles, making this net where the other animals can come up and feed through it and forage, because all of the fish, don't tell them, they don't know, they can't swim through those scary bubbles. So they literally stay inside of them, and the whales will come and get them right out of there. If the fish only knew, there would be trouble. So here's a little whale song. There's actually a place here that you can, if you go online, go look up Jupiter Foundation. We actually have a sauna buoy that actually sits right offshore out here. You can hear live whale song from Puako, from jupiterfoundation.org. So yes, it's pretty cool. I mean, these guys, I mean, it's, again, only the males sing. It changes yearly, but all of the whales in these same areas sing almost the exact same song. We have no idea how this works. I mean, it's absolutely amazing if you think about animals over this range that are actually singing pretty much the identical song, and there's new parts that are added to it, and they know how to sing those new parts that are added to it. You know, how does this all work out? Well, clearly there's a higher level of communication that we just don't understand or know about with these guys, but this song obviously is very valuable for the whales, and it travels over long, long distances. You know, sound travels through water much differently than through air. So it's something that we're looking to learn a lot more about. On the East Coast, it's kind of interesting, you know, they've been studying these sounds. They've actually found out one of the sounds is a surfacing sound. And the whale will make this certain sound, and every time it makes a sound, it's like say, hey, I'm going up for a breath of air, and they'll take a breath of air. It's pretty cool. So they figured out one sound, what it's meant, and they pair it with that behavior. But we really have nothing that we know. Again, why? Territoriality, spacing with other males, advertising to the females, look at me, I'm ready. Synchronize or actually initiate estrus in females, could be a competition, males that form male-male alliances. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could possibly be, we just don't know for sure. But again, we know it's out there, and if you guys are around long enough this year, go for a snorkel, put your ears in the water, just lay there, you will hear whale song. It's pretty amazing. So we're going to talk a little bit about feeding. So this is, we talked about feeding for these guys, and people were asking, you know, how, it's just so warm down there, it's so cold up there, you wouldn't think there would be much up there. The upwellings and the currents, the way the ocean works, all the currents push up really high nutrient levels up in the northern latitudes. This is what it looks like at one of these feeding areas. This isn't just humpback whales feeding, this is the food chain feeding. I mean, literally the food chain is in action. So you've got tiny little krill that works its way up to fish, and things to birds, to other fish. I mean, it all the way up. So you're going literally from the smallest thing to the biggest thing with the whales coming in and eating it. But it's action everywhere. And then there's fishermen on the other sides of it. It's crazy up there when this stuff happens. For those of you who've been there and lived there, you know how it is. But the feeding's amazing. They work in groups. They oftentimes will come up in the same position. They can use disarticulate their hyperextend their lower jaw to really give a big, can't tell if it's hard to see. See the next picture here. There's some of that baleen again. You see it laying in there. It's coming up. More of the baleen hanging from the top and some of the fish that are hanging in there. You know, everybody thinks that whales only eat, you know, microscopic little tiny plankton. They'll eat fish. They'll eat whatever they can get in their mouth, as long as it's small enough to go down their throat. There's one here, I think, this one's really cool. So you see the bubbles coming up. It's a little hard to see. But this, right here, that's the whale's mouth. That's his bottom jaw. Extended out. These are the pectoral flippers off the side. This is his head. That's that whale's mouth. Coming up, getting ready to feed. So they actually had huge mouths, but I can guarantee you that if you ever read the Bible, Jonah did not get swallowed by a humpback whale because his throat would be way too small. So it was not a humpback whale that did anything with Jonah. I can guarantee that. Just they're literally, again, it's only about the size of a grapefruit. So they have a very small throat. They can't take big things in. Now they may feed in cooperative groups. Again, here in Hawaii, there's no cooperation. It's every man for himself. But up there, they work together and they realize that by working in teams, they're able to actually feed much more efficiently. Let me see here, that one didn't ever work anyway. Let me see what I have done.
So the male is eating one burger.
The male, no, there's no eating here at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's really not enough food here for them. They just, every once in a while, there may be a small pocket of something out there that's really small. And I never say never. You know, if they came across, if somehow, you know, we do actually get gyres off this island, actually will bring up nutrients depending on which way they're spinning. If a whale were to come across something like that, never say never. But the chances of them feeding it, just because there's not enough for them to feed off of it, is very, very small. So what are their threats these days? Well, natural threats, orcas, sharks, false killer whales, sometimes we mess with them. The bigger things that we're looking at, the entanglements, the vessel collision, habitat degradation, competition, pollution, harassment, and there is still some whaling going on in some other countries. So those are kind of their big issues that they're fighting right now. Here's an example of a calf that was struck by a boat. And this is one of the things that we really work with a lot of boat captains. Again, the challenging part is they go down 2 to 3 minutes. In a boat cruising along, you can go a long ways in 3 minutes. Have no idea that there was even a whale there, and the next thing you know, the whale's surfacing underneath you. The whales don't always look out when they're coming up, unfortunately. So we do have situations where they will actually get hit. You can see the propeller chop it all along there by boats. Sometimes they live. I think this one actually may have lived. Here's one that got propellered. You know, anytime you're at the surface, you're vulnerable for this. The bad part about it is that once you get hit like this, now you're going to be even more vulnerable because you're injured, and now you're spending more time at the surface where you're more likely to get hit by another boat. So it can compound the effect there too. This looks pretty bad, but probably going to be able to live through that. That's not too bad. You can see this guy got hit by something a long time ago, but these are the things that we're really trying to teach people, is that slower is better. I know that everybody wants to get to where they're going these days, and gas is expensive, but this time of year, it's really best to slow down and to go slower. Prop protection technology, some people like to use the prop guards. Those things can actually help. Obviously, if there's something protecting your prop from hitting the whale, it's going to stop some damage there. The big problem that we have with this is a lot of people say that they're inefficient, causes cavitation. Just it costs money and they don't want to do it. There's some sonar technologies that we're looking at. Are there ways to actually see them underwater? But really the big thing that we're doing is boater awareness and education. Letting boaters know, we send out mail outs, I go out to the harbors and talk to the boaters, that you really need to slow down, you need to keep somebody at the helm, you need to watch where you're going. Those are kind of the big things to help keep away from those guys. Some of the other things here is the entanglement and marine debris. There's a lot of junk going on in the ocean, and everybody's kind of becoming more and more familiar with this, especially with the Japanese tsunami, and everybody's wondering where's all the trash at, and when can I go salvage somebody's stuff out of their house as it floats by. And the stuff is out there, and it is coming around. I don't know exactly what's coming to Hawaii, but there's a lot of other junk that's out there that these guys get caught in. Lost or abandoned fishing gear, vessel genesis that they just throw off, and a lot of times terrestrial trash. But they get entangled in this stuff, and it can cause suffocation or drowning. Most of the time they don't drown because they can usually move the gear that they have. It's usually the physical trauma and the starvation, which leads to predation and infection. If you look at this animal right here, this part should normally be like all the way up to here. This is all completely, he's basically lost all of his body muscle. There's a rope that's attached right here. It's going around, it's actually entangled around his body. These are all little whale lice that are all over the body. This whale's in a real bad situation. So we do see these guys, and this is a little video of it. Can you flip these lights for just a second? I might be using it. Sorry guys, I can't get any louder than that.
The Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Sanctuary's rescue team is one of the few disentanglement response teams that is authorized by our fisheries to free large whales from life-threatening entanglements. The sanctuary's team partners with other agencies like NOAA Fisheries, Hawaii's Department of Land
here, we'll talk about this in a second if you have questions too, no worries.
At near the surface, we can haul ourselves closer. As seen here from the camera attached to the rescuer's helmet. We then attach a buoys right behind him to limit its movements even more. At this point, he sets the intent to carry down. That's to make the whale free. Notice how the rescuer watches the animal. His teammate attached a keg buoy and the gear at all times. This whale has multiple wraps of line around the base of its tail, feet along the trailer. The trailing line provides drag, causing the wraps to cut deep into the animal. With an authorized vessel standing by, we use a specially designed poking knife on the end of a pole to reach forward to cut the whale free. Here we have some helmet cam footage showing one of the rescuers keeping the rescue inflatable in position right behind the animal. The other rescuer has a knife on the animal. The knife is dull on the outside and sharp on the inside surface to protect the animal. The rescuer reaches forward to carefully cut the wraps which over time have embedded themselves deeply into the whale's tail. 3 cuts are made in succession, at which time remain around the shed and the whale is entirely free of all gear. The seconds we suffer was once a life-threatening entanglement. We realize we can't save every whale entangled gear. However, hopefully we can learn from our efforts and recover gear to gain information about the threat. For the past several years, the sanctuary and members have freed 9 Humpback whales in Hawaii from life-threatening entanglements. Some animals, like the animals from here, are tangled in marine debris. Other animals were entangled in fish gear. This animal entangled to the mouth was carrying hundreds of feet of line with a large buoy. Once cut free, we found that the gear had been set at the roll of islands in the center of the Bering Sea. This is a straight line distance of over 2,500 nautical miles from the Hawaiian Islands. We will continue to free large whales from life-threatening entanglements. Our ultimate goal is to prevent or at least reduce the threat of entanglement for these animals in the future.
So the big thing there is that they're talking about is that, you know, when we go out to do this stuff, we don't, you know, first thing we do is we go out and we document. We get cameras in the water, we see where the entanglements are at, we look at all these things and evaluate, one, is this life-threatening for the whale? If it's not life-threatening for the whale, we're going to leave it alone. We've actually had cases where the rope was just about frayed all the way through and we saw it like, okay, it's going to break in a week or two and it'll be no point. But if it is something that we think that we're going to be able to do, then we're going to start, we'll get our team there. On this island, since I'm the only person, I basically go out and I'll actually throw my grapple and it'll attach to the line that's on the whale. And on my grapple line, I'm going to have a satellite tag. So it's going to send out a signal where the whale's at. So we can actually follow the whale around from then on, as long as that grapple will stay in the gear. Because I'm the only person here, I have to actually have other staff come over. So usually what we do is I'll go out, put the gear on, follow the whale around, document pictures, do all that. If it's early enough in the morning, they'll come over right away and we'll go for that afternoon. If it's in the afternoon, we wait till the next day, watch the satellite tag, reestablish position, and then go out and try to get the whale. But as you were saying, we never get in the water. There's a couple different ways that we do it. We have poles that actually have knives attached to them, like you saw there with the boat where he was just trying to cut the rope. It's very difficult to cut a rope with a knife in the boat. The knives are bent over. They're not sharp on the outside. They're not sharp on the point. They are sharp on the inside. Even so, there are going to be times where we're going to get little nicks and cuts on the whale, but in the big picture for that whale, getting all of that gear off, those little nicks and dings, doesn't even bother them. There are also times when we can't get up close enough and get in there, whether it's not safe. We've got a big long pole that we can actually attach a knife, and this is the preferred method for us, is to attach the knife. Then the line will come back to the boat off of that knife. So we can actually get up there and clip a knife on, pull the pole off of it, leave the knife around that rope. There's an eye hook, so that rope will come back to the boat. I just put it over the front of the boat and let the drag of the boat actually do the cutting for us. So since that drag is pulling behind that knife, there's going to eventually pull through that rope. That way we're off of the whale and it can't get us. Because when we were out there, you saw the peduncle slap, where they were trying to swing and do those things. If they don't like you, they're going to start throwing their tail around, they're going to start hitting you with their pectoral, try to hit you with their pectoral flipper. So we have to be very, very careful. The main goal for these entanglement responses is so that we can hopefully prevent it from happening in the future. You know, going out and saving one whale, yeah, it's great, it's nice. Out of 12,000 whales that are out there, is that one whale going to save the population? Probably not. But the bigger picture is, can we get information from this entanglement to prevent it from happening in the future? And that's what we're looking at. So we're working with different fishermen up in Alaska, trying to provide alternative methods to some of this gear that will allow for the whales to get out. One of the big things that we're doing is breakaway links. It's a link that will provide, it actually snaps at a certain amount of pressure. Normal pressure that they would be able to do the line pulling up and all that stuff is fine, but when it gets a 90,000-pound whale tugging on it, there's a point where it actually will break off, and only the whale will only have a small amount of gear rather than carrying an entire crab pot from Love Islands down. So it is a process, but we are hoping to learn some stuff about it, as we are learning a lot of stuff about the whales out here. I hope you guys learned a little bit today. Thank you guys very much for coming out, and answer any questions for you.
What kind of response are you getting from the fishermen that last time?
Everybody's a little bit different, and I think for them, if there's a way that we can help them, prevent them from losing their gear that doesn't cost them a lot, they're all for it. If it costs a lot, it's tough, and understandably so. I mean, every dollar to them counts, so it's a tough situation. But generally speaking, because we're trying to find a way to help them save their gear, they're pretty much into it, because gear is super expensive. I mean, that poly rope that they use is thousands of dollars for them. So if we can prevent them from losing that and save oil at the same time, everybody wins.
How many incidents do you find a year?
Here in Hawaii, entanglements, it's usually around 10. On this island, it's usually you usually see about 3 every year. Some years heavier, some years lighter, it just really kind of depends. Depends a lot on what effort we have on the water. When we were doing our SPLASH research program, when we had all of our researchers out, we saw a lot more stuff because they knew what to look for. So we've been training a lot of our local companies on what to look for. I've got I call it the Coconut Wireless. I've got emails that I'll send out when we're looking for things. And a lot of the boat companies now know what to look for, how to look for things, and they'll call back and say, hey, I found it, here it is, and they'll share the information. So it's a growing network.
Yeah, I got a question. Let's say you have a whale that's been entangled when you remove the entanglement. Is there any different response? In other words, once it's removed, does the whale do anything like jump out of the water and be happy, or does it
Dive. I mean,
I was just curious if there was a reaction.
most of the time, and the ones that I've done, usually they've got a bunch of gear on, which is kind of, I mean, they can dive, but diving is harder for them when they have the buoys all over them. Most of the time, the ones that I've seen when we freed them, they pretty much dove and took off. I mean, it's like, I'm out of here, man, hell. I get the email every year from the one in San Francisco where the whale nudged everybody and thanked them and did all of that. And like I said, I'll never say never. But, from what I've seen out there, I've never seen a humpback whale that once we've taken the gear off that wants to come back and nudge us and say thank you. They're usually so concerned we just get the heck out of Dodge. They're glad they thought that they're gone. They usually beat cheeks. I have seen turtles when I've released them jump for joy out of them. Actually, when the tsunami came and I was taking turtles out of the lava field, I had a couple turtles that were out there for at least a day. And 3 of them that I put back in the water all kind of simultaneously, they all went out and dove under them. They all 3 jumped up out of the water and took off again. So I think they were very glad to be back in the water. But these guys, it's most of the time, I think it's such a traumatic experience for them having that stuff, having people all around them when we're doing the entanglement response. Most of the time, it's just pretty much, hey, I'm going to dive, I'm going to go swim, and I'm going to be out of here. The hard part for us is that, we really want to know, at what point can we save this whale? Are there some of these entanglements that even if I get it off, the whale's a goner? There's nothing that we can do for this whale. There's some cases one case that I can think of where we didn't disentangle a whale, where it was so tight around its tail, there was no tail left. It had just died. And even if we got it off, it would have still just been a stub. I mean, he was swimming with his pectoral flippers, is how he was swimming. And what's the benefit of that point? You take it off, it may actually bleed even more because it may be like a tourniquet on it. So, it's hard to say, but there are times when you go out there and there's really no point in risking our lives and getting harmed for an animal that's going to die anyway. So we're very curious to figure out,